Welcome to Behind the Line, the podcast where you'll get untold stories from first responders and military veterans. I'm Tim Hegman. I'll be your host. My guest today served in the United States Marine Corps from 1987 to 1991. After being honorably discharged, he joined the Simi Valley Police Department in 1991. Just 3 years into his law enforcement career, he was involved in an officer-involved shooting. As a result of that incident, he was awarded the Medal of Valor. In 1997, he left the Simi Valley Police Department and went to work for his hometown and became a police officer with the Oxnard Police Department. In 2020, after 29 years of service, he retired as a sergeant. During his career, he, like so many other police officers, were involved in a number of critical incidents. After his retirement, he found purpose in working with and serving as a public safety advocate. Please welcome my guest and friend, Jeff McGreevy. Jeff, welcome to the Behind the Line podcast.
Thank you, man. It's good to be here. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I know you made that drive from another county. How was the traffic? How did LA traffic treat you?
You know, my favorite was the 405, 101 interchange, like going into the bowels of hell. But because I love you so much, I did it. I didn't quit.
No, number one, I appreciate it very much. And it's funny you said, because I could be in the best mood and I've been driving to see some family member, but you get to the transition of the 405 and the 101. Yeah. And sometimes that mood changes quickly.
Yeah, you're like, we're driving through Calabasas and it's beautiful and everything's wide open and nice, and then it just slowly.
Yeah.
But it was all good, man.
Well, you made it here, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you. So obviously, there's a number of things I want to talk about. You know, your career, the incident you were involved with in your shooting, other incidents you were exposed to and part of. And to learn what you're doing these days for officer wellness. But first, let's talk a little bit about you, your background. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Long Island, New York. My family's East Coast, and moved to California when I was 9 years old and in fourth grade. And we landed in Oxnard. So went to Oxnard High School. And when I was 17, in my senior year, I joined the Marine Corps.
Wow, 17. So you were still in school.
Mm-hmm.
And made that decision to serve your country and join the Marines. So good for you.
Thanks, man. I tried I sent them a letter when I was 14, and I still have the thing that says, "Thanks for your interest in the United States Marine Corps, but because you're only 14,
Is that a true story?
Here's a sticker." Yeah, it's a true story.
Oh my gosh.
They sent me a sticker, so I was,
Well, it reminds me of Colonel Hackworth. Joined early on. He tried to join. I think he actually pulled it off and got in there.
He got in there
quite
early,
young.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great book.
During the Korean War, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So funny how back then you could kind of
About Face is it's the size of an encyclopedia, but it's an amazing leadership book.
Very much so. Yeah. Highly recommend that book. That's a great one. But just know you have to devote some time to it.
Oh yeah. And even on audio, it's like 17 hours long to try and listen to it on the Audible.
Yeah, no, it's a great book. What about family? Here now.
Yeah, so I'm married to my high school sweetheart. We met in 11th grade, and a year out of high school we got married. So we were super young when we got married. I was 18, she was 19, and we've been married for 34, going on 35 years, but we've been together for 36 or 37 years.
Wow.
And it's just one of those relationships that it's kind of a unicorn, because most people don't last that long. And there's only a small number of people that actually, have a relationship she's my high school sweetheart. So from 11th grade on, we've been together. We got 2 kids and 1 grandson, and another grandson on the way in about 6 weeks. But my boy's 32, my daughter's 28, and they're both fantastic young adults, and they're thriving. They're doing really well. And my son is married and getting ready to have his second child, and we couldn't be happier.
That's good. Proud husband, proud dad, and proud grandpa.
Yeah.
Good for you.
That's the best part. I think the grandpa stuff is like, you get a redo from, all the stuff, the little mistakes you made when you were a young father. You're older and wiser and have more time too. When I was young, my wife and I talk about this all the time about when they were kids, I was working the graveyard shift. I was working overtime, and my wife, fortunately, we got into a position where she could stay home and take care of them and get them to school and take care of all the things in the house. And then my job was to go and and earn a living and sacrificed a lot, but really I credit my wife for the way those kids came out, because it was her dedication and love to them that that made it happen.
That's awesome, and well said, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, so you were in the Marine Corps, served your country. Thank you for your service.
You, sir. You too.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Police officer, is something you always thought about, or you thought that came on later on in life, or why did you become a police officer?
I think I always wanted to serve. So I had I was a very patriotic person from a young age. And, my grandfather was in the Marine Corps in World War II. And my father was out of my life from probably age 7 on. My parents divorced early, but my dad was in a car accident and he got partially paralyzed. And it was a drunk driving. He had too much to drink and, got in the car and drove when he shouldn't have, and the road bent to the left and his car kept going straight, and he hit a tree or a telephone pole, and that changed his life forever. He spent the next 30 plus years of his life in a nursing home. So he was out of my life early. And my grandfather, I mentioned I was from the East Coast originally. I lived with my grandparents. From the time I was in kindergarten, I was, living with my grandparents. And then when we moved to California, I kind of got uprooted from my family. But my grandfather was kind of my hero, as far as like that person that he was very mysterious. He didn't talk about, he was one of those people from that era that he didn't talk a lot about his service and what he did. Even when I was in the Marine Corps, I asked him some questions, and there was stuff that he was exposed to and experienced that he just didn't want to talk about anymore. And so he didn't talk to me specifically about things that he did in the military, but it was like always from a little kid, it was like, your grandpa Charlie was in the Marines, and but my aunts, one of my aunts specifically, I always remembered her saying that Charlie had shell shock. And I think that's what they referred to as kind of what we call post-traumatic stress now.
Right.
But it's like, when he came home from the war, he had shell shock. And my mom told me about some nightmares that he had, and told me a little bit about some things that they experienced with him when they were young. And you fast forward 40 years, and some of those things my children experienced some of those same things that, a sliver of that my grandfather experienced. But anyway, I was patriotic from a young age, and I knew I wanted to go into the military, and my grandfather was a Marine, and I got brought up that the Marines were the best and the toughest. And so it was there was never a doubt on which service I was going to join.
Yeah.
And that led me to, when people ask me, why I became a police officer, the best answer I have is that I had an opportunity to serve my country. And then I thought, well, maybe now I can go serve my community. Maybe I can go home and use this experience that I had. The Marine Corps, they grow you up real quick. I joined when I was 17.
Yeah.
I got out when I was 21. And so my maturity got accelerated, and it helped me. There's no way I would have probably made it through the hiring process had I not gone in the Marine Corps. That gave me the competitive edge to compete with all the college boys.
Yeah, good for you. Yeah, definitely. So you had that sense of service.
Yeah,
to
for
continue
sure.
on. You served your nation. Time to go back and eventually serve your hometown. But before that, you served another community with Simi Valley. So,
yeah.
Okay. So as a police officer and up till you retired, even as a sergeant, what were some of the assignments that you worked?
Yeah, I did a lot of good stuff. I was mostly on the field services side or the operational side. So I served on 2 SWAT teams, very fortunate. So in Simi Valley, I was a patrol officer and on the SWAT team for 2 years. And when I lateraled to Oxnard PD, their SWAT team was in a transition where they were going to more of a full-time team. So it was a quasi, they weren't truly full-time, but it was this quasi full-time where they were taking everybody that was on the SWAT team and they were going to put them into a unit. and they were all going to work together, and they were all on a SWAT team, and that was very exciting to me. So I was like, all right, I got some military experience. I've been through some critical incidents now, and there's this team that's a little bit bigger, and it's a busier city. And my goal was like, man, I'd love to get on that SWAT team. And a couple of my friends were on that SWAT team. I'd gone to school, SWAT school, with a couple of the guys that were on that team. So I was kind of building relationships, and really they were busy, and I wanted to be busier. And so when I went over to Oxnard, that was my goal, is I wanted to try and get on that SWAT team. So anyway, patrol, got on very quickly, within a year, once I finished my probation, basically in Oxnard, I got into the Special Enforcement Unit, which was their SWAT team. I did that for 8 years, and for 4 of those years, I was a canine handler. So, I had SWAT, canine, and in the gang unit all at one time. Tremendous amount of work, but it was really an awesome job. But it was, looking back on it, when you're a canine handler, you really got to be focused on the canine world.
Yeah.
The SWAT world, you really need to be focused on the tactical side. And I had a lot of experience, so that stuff was okay. But it's like, it was always going back and forth and balancing. And then our day job was we were in the gang unit, so doing uniform gang enforcement, surveillance. We were the team, like if somebody needed to go get found, we were the ones that were going to go try and find them, doing probation searches, working with other units and other departments. And when something needed to get done, that usually came to us. And then on the training side too, because we were the SWAT team, we were doing a lot of the in-service training. So tactical training, tactical decision-making, scenario-based training. That was really cool experience to be involved in that. And back to patrol, and I became a field training officer. So it's like, usually people start as an FTO and they're like 2-3 years in patrol, then they become an FTO. And like, I became an FTO when I had like 11 years on, or 14 years. I think it was actually 14 years.
But a lot of experience.
I had a bunch of experience, but now I'm the older guy, calmed down a bit, you're right. And I've, been through some stuff. So it was good. I was kind of that, the FTO that, I had experience, which was good. And, I think I contributed to that program in a good way. There was ways where I was like, hey, I think we can do a little better over here with some of our training that we're doing. And we had a pre-field training academy that we did, like they come out of the academy, but then we had a 6 or 8 week program where we'd put them through, like, okay, here's how you learn how to be an Oxnard police officer and what we do. From there, went to detectives. I was a gang investigator, and then a robbery, violent assault investigator. So about a year and a half as a gang investigator. So all that experience I had working in the gang unit and my field experience finally got to where I could be a detective. And that's where I was really looking for, like, hey, it's time to try and advance. You want to start getting into opportunities to try and get promoted, because your body's starting to get old, back's getting sore, and you can't work patrol for the rest of your life. You're not going to make it, dude. Like,
it's a
I
long
don't
career.
know if your back is going to, push this black and white around forever.
Yeah.
So I was really happy for the opportunity to get into detectives, worked in a phenomenal unit. And then for a short period of time, I got moved from gangs to robbery and violent assault. And then from there I promoted. That's where I went to community policing. And that's where I went, like, I had this, everything else I just talked to you about was pretty much operational, except for the detective piece, like, field services and patrol and gang unit. And then going into the investigation unit, but it was that background in gangs that got me there. And now I'm in community policing, where you have to go out and build relationships with the community and liaison with the community. And that's where my career really shifted, where I saw there was this whole big picture that I didn't really recognize, or I didn't want to be part of, because I was in the operational side.
Yeah.
We were dealing with bad guys and really, really, really bad people. And now your job is to liaison with the community and build relationships. It was totally different from what I was doing. And then promoted to sergeant, became a field supervisor, and then I got an opportunity to now be a sergeant over the community policing detail that I had previously been in. And then I did that for the rest of my career. The other things I was involved in was I was part of our trauma support team, which became our peer program. I did that for about 15 years. That became a very important part of my career in the wellness journey and kind of the work that I do now post-retirement. was that trauma support team, and we both know Dr. Larry Blum pretty well, and Larry is really one of my inspirations. Here I got to work around Larry a lot, and I learned so much from him. And then our crisis intervention team, our CIT program, I was a coordinator for that, and that led me to be able to, again, relationship building with the hospitals and the behavioral health units in the county. And all of a sudden I got this, I was like this dumb kid from Oxnard that got to like get a seat at the table with executives from the county and from these organizations and the hospitals, like having meetings with the president and the CEO of the hospital, because then understanding how important the relationship is between the police department and the hospital, because we're bringing a lot of clients. We're bringing them a bunch of people, and there's a lot of stuff that happens in the emergency room with some of the people that we bring them. And then also, like I said, on the behavioral health side is working with the people that stir the drink on the mental health side for the county, and dealing with the homeless population and the folks that are walking around with severe mental illness.
Wow. Well, it sounds like a very in-depth, a lot of experience in your career, not just the operational side, but moving over, like you said, to the community side,
Mm-hmm.
which I think a lot of times people don't have a lot of officers. I know for me, I got involved in that too, but early on, I didn't really know much about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you work it and you realize, oh, this is actually very important. You build those relationships, and then you talk about your peer support and officer wellness, which is so important and which has become really a priority today, over time, to watch out for our first responders and their wellness. I want to talk about that in a lot more depth. However, just briefly, I want to talk about some of the incidents that happened to you.
Sure.
That really, in time brought you to where you are today to help others, Yeah. So you were involved in a shooting. I know prior to this conversation, you and I talked, you responded to another shooting that you weren't involved in, but involved another officer, friend who was shot, and obviously traumatic, and a number of more other incidents. So real quick, what are some incidents you were involved in your shooting, what you were exposed to with your friend, some other ones that you can bring up?
Sure.
And then we'll get to the officer wellness part, how you got there.
Yeah. And I think, and thanks for, kind of introducing that, but I definitely believe that there's a cumulative effect to doing the job. I had the honor to do it for 29 years and 33 if you count my military service. So 33 years of either, serving my country or serving my community. And over the long haul, what I learned is that, I don't believe that one incident is what gets a cop or firefighter. I think it's a cumulative effect of all this stuff that they get exposed to throughout their career, and at some point, the pot kind of gets full and stuff starts spilling over. There's a lot of different analogies about that. Cop stew, the glass of water that's overflowing, or you half full, or you half empty, right? But that happened to me probably about 24 years into my career. Is where it finally got to a point. It's like, I got to deal with this. So some of the stuff, so I was involved in two shootings, and one of them 3 years into my career, like you mentioned on the intro. And then the second one was where my partner shot an unarmed suspect, and it was an accident. But the first shooting that I was involved in was in Simi Valley, had 3 years on, and it was a man with a gun call, and a 19-year-old girl called and said, my dad is drunk, he's on prescription medication, and he has a gun. He said he's going to kill us all, and then he's going to kill himself. And it was her and her two younger brothers. She was 19, and I think the boys were, like 12 and maybe 14, or 11, 12, those ages. So there's three young people in their house, and their dad is going around from room to room trying to load guns, and they're coming around behind him and hiding guns, and they're hiding ammunition, and their dad's threatening to murder them. That's the basics of what the call was. And I always kind of forget this part. I had a ride along with me. I had an Explorer that was with me, a 20-year-old Explorer. And as I'm driving up to this call, I'm like talking through some things that we're going to do, and telling him where he's going to be and what he's going to do. Because, before we went on air, you had mentioned a thing about like how some places have policies like, hey, if you're going to a certain kind of call, you need to stop, drop them off,
Right.
tell somebody that or tell them go to this is the days when they had to go to a payphone.
Better have some change.
Right? And, this guy was with me the whole way, and I kind of talked through, here's what I'm going to do, and this is what I want you to do. And one of the things I always told ride-alongs is that if we're in danger, something's happening, I want you to run away. Go, get away from the car, get away from me, run away, and then, go get help. But don't stay here, don't stay around. If there's something dangerous, like if you feel like, your life is in danger, run away, get away, okay? And we'll deal with what's happening. But anyway, get up there, and my academy classmate and I, Matt Hopkins, arrived together. So we're rolling code up in the hills in Simi Valley, and we end up getting in trail, and we arrived together, and Matt was in front of me. And as we're parking the car, we see this girl who ends up being that 19-year-old girl that called. We just see this girl like start sprinting down the street towards us. And we had parked quite a ways away, like the house was like 7 or 9 houses away up the street. And we get out of the car. I get my shotgun. All I had at the time was a 12. This is 1995.
Oh, yeah.
All right. I have my pistol, and then I have a shotgun. That's it. And I got, 4 rounds of buckshot in the gun. That's it. I don't have a side saddle on it. I don't have ghost ring sights. I got a bead sight on the front. That's it. But get out, and Matt says, hey, I'll talk to the RP, the reporting party. Cool. And I said, okay, I'll go up the street and try and get eyes on the front of the house. So make my way up to the house, and I just kind of hide in the shadows and get myself across the street and get in a position where I'm straight across the street from the house they were calling. It was really dark in front. And so, all right, I'm up here. And what my mindset was when I got up there was that this is going to turn into a standoff. I'm thinking, okay, the girl's out. Let's figure out where the other 2 young people are. But my thought was like, and we're still the only ones there.
Right.
So he's 7 houses down the street. I'm up there by myself across the street. And my thought was, as the troops start to arrive, we're just going to deploy them, start to set up a perimeter. And then I'm thinking this will probably turn into a SWAT problem, and they'll call the SWAT team, and then we'll end up being out here for half the night.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm across the street, and I'm concealed in the dark, and I got a good view of the front of the house, and there was a car parked the wrong way in front of the house, okay, against the curb, and it was parked back toward where we were coming from. And my partner, Matt, says, the girl says that her 11-year-old brother is sitting in front, is in the car that's parked the wrong way in front of the house. And about 30 seconds after he said that, I hear some yelling in the dark, and then I see the guy walking down the driveway of his house with a rifle in his hand. And he walks down the driveway, and he walks around the back of that car, and he goes up to the passenger window, and he extends his arm with this rifle, and he's aiming it into the glass. And I'm behind him across the street, and I'm going, oh my God, he's going to murder this kid right in front of me.
Yeah.
And I have a shotgun with buckshot. I can't shoot him from across the street because the pattern of I could hit the car. I could, and I make the decision that I'm going to rush him. Like I have to close the distance on him and get to a position where I can, I have to try and stop him.
Right.
And when I got up and started to move, he moved to the front of the car, and he's standing in front of the car with his arm extended, pointed toward into the windshield of the car. And and this all happens very quickly. I get up, I'm starting to move. He moves, he points the rifle toward the car, and that's when I start yelling at him. I yelled probably something like, police, drop it. But I start yelling at him. And when I yell at him, I distracted him. I got his attention, and he lowered the rifle, and he turned this way and was looking down the street. He didn't know where I was. He turned away from me, and in the next driveway is a kid and the next door neighbor. And now
they're outside?
They're outside. There's I think it's just the neighbors, these
right.
bystanders in the next driveway when he turns, I see a lady and a kid, like a 10, 11-year-old in the driveway, and he turns, and as soon as he turns, he takes a step and he starts to raise the rifle toward those people. And then that's when I engaged him. So I fired a shot at him, and he winced and he started turning towards me. The rifle's coming towards me. And then I fired again, and that's when I had a malfunction.
Oh, wow.
So when I talk to people about this incident, I'm 25 years old, don't have a lot of experience. Yes, I was in the military, but I don't have any combat experience. I've got some basic training, but when I fired that shot at him, I thought that he was going to be rolled up in a ball on the front yard and there'd be 2 sneakers in the street.
Right.
Because I thought, okay, now when I make this decision and I shoot at him with his shotgun, that he's not going to be there anymore.
Right.
And it's going to be over. And when the smoke cleared, there's this, second of this smoke that comes out of the end of the gun, gives you blindness, just a split second, but things are happening so fast, or maybe things slow down so much that it seems like it's there longer. And when that smoke cleared, he's still there. Like, oh shit.
And it's nighttime, you said?
It's night. Sorry. Yeah. It's 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And so I fire, he starts to turn, like he realizes that, oh, something just happened from over there, and the rifle's turning towards me. So I cycle the shotgun and click, I short rack the shotgun.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I remember for a second rolling the gun over, like, what is wrong with this thing?
Right.
And then I double tapped him. So I cleared the malfunction, and then I hit him twice and knocked him down and stopped the problem. But I just spent, 5 minutes telling you a bit about this story. And when you listen to the audio of what happened, what you hear is boom, boom, boom. But all this stuff that I experienced and that I saw that seemed like it was taking so long really only, took a few seconds.
Yeah.
To fire that shot. I have a malfunction, clear the malfunction, and then lay 2 good shots on him, in right on top of each other.
Yeah.
Boom,
Yeah.
boom. Like as soon, it was, so it happened very fast, but it takes a long time to describe. But anyway, so that's what happened in that thing, man. He goes down, and I definitely experienced tunnel vision, because when he went down, I hit him all through the midsection and the hip, and he's laying face down and the rifle is underneath his body. And as I'm coming up on him, he's rolling over and he's trying to pull the rifle out from underneath him.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have to shoot this guy again from really close range. And I'm screaming at him, don't do it. Don't do it. I'm screaming. The way my recording, I didn't have an audio, there's no body camera. There was an open 911 line in the house.
Oh,
that I was yelling so loud that the phone line in the house heard the muffled gunshots and me yelling at him, don't do it. Don't do it. And I was screaming at him, don't do it. And he's rolling over, trying to pull the rifle out from underneath his body. And then he just collapsed. He ran out. And then that's when I see the barrel of a gun come into my view. And that's my partner, Matt, who, while this all happened, is running up the street to come and help. And that's when my vision opened back up, because, everything that I was looking at was like through a very narrow, the only thing that mattered is what he was doing and where that gun was pointed. And then that's the first time where this other stimulus came from that actually caused me to look around, open up my field of vision. Okay. And now you can get back oriented to your surroundings. So we hook him up he had a rifle in his hand. He had a hunting knife in his other hand and a pistol in his pocket.
Wow.
And that's what he came out of the house with. So the people that were on the driveway next door was the boy that was in the car.
Oh,
was at the next door neighbor's house. So that was a lady that lived next door. So it had happened between me getting there and the girl running out. The boy had gotten out of the car and had just gone over to the neighbor's house. But he came out and he was hunting for his kids.
Thinking the kid was in the car.
He went to the car. He was looking for the car. He went and was looking into the car. He's pointing through the window, and I can't see because it's dark. And then he said the windshield. my thought process was like, oh my God, I'm not going to let him murder him right in front of me.
You went with
But that was what it was terrifying to go like, oh my God. And then you also go like, what do you do? And then like once the switch flipped that it's on, is that, if I look back at this 25 years later, I ambushed him. He was I had an advantage. I had a tactical advantage over him because I could move on him. He doesn't know that I'm here yet. What's the best way to attack this problem?
Right.
If you fast forward 25 years, like I would have been across the street with a rifle that had a scope on, or like some kind of a 4-power, and I would have dealt with it from where I was, my position. I just didn't have that. That wasn't an option. I could have just stayed there and let it happen, or I'm like, let's go. That's what I did. I took the fight to him to stop him.
And the advancement in weapons being deployed in the field with officers since then to today is incredible. And one of the major reasons for that, and I'm sure is the North Hollywood shootout. Those officers were outgunned. A lot more officers than the two guys.
Right.
But they were hunting. They were looking, the officers, to find these rifles to take these guys out, to stop them from doing what they're doing. So, back then you did what you had to do. And, you stopped the problem. All 3 kids okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, it sounds like you...
and then he survived. Believe it or not.
That was my next question, yeah. Did he do prison time?
No. They ended up not charging him because, not to go too much into the weeds on this, is that the people that called and gave statements said this is what he was doing. In the aftermath, they changed their stories a bit about, what they told people. And then, kind of the DA's perspective was, and I'm not saying they're wrong, they're like, he got his punishment that day because, look, man, we stopped it and the kids are okay. And he didn't go to jail, let's put it that way. But
yeah. So, but you stopped the threat. So good for you on your part.
Yeah, thank you.
So you were talking about the cumulative, what happens over a long career in law enforcement or firefighters. This just it's a major incident, but you said early on that you had experienced a few things maybe that your grandfather had experienced after coming back from World War II. You were involved in this shooting, another shooting that your partner shot somebody who was unarmed. Another friend of yours was shot that you rode with in an ambulance, but all these other things.
Another one of my friend was shot that, may have been a guest on this podcast.
So let me back up. That's a very good point. So just so people, watching or listening real quick. So our second episode of this podcast was of an officer from the El Segundo Police Department, Ray Garcia, who at the time was a lieutenant working overtime. Anyways, he was involved in a shooting where Ray and his partner were both shot. Ray was shot point blank in the face, recovered. Ultimately, he and his partner shot the suspect, killing him. But Ray returned to work, after being shot in the face point blank 4 months later. So it turns out in our conversation, as we got to know each other, you said, I served with Ray in the Marine Corps, and small world. Yeah. And you were just because of this podcast, you'd said, you reconnect with Ray and met with him a week or two ago, had lunch, and shared some good memories. So Ray being shot in the face. Then another partner of yours, real quickly, you were not there, but he was on an incident, and he was also in a gun battle, a shooting, and shot in the face.
Yeah. He got hit right in the chin.
Right in the chin.
Yeah.
Okay. And did he survive?
He did. Yeah.
And you responded to that scene, you said, and rode to the ambulance. And what do you experience when you come upon a scene and there's your friend, who you think could die, who was, shot in the face?
Yeah. So to kind of back up and give you the story on that. Well, in 2006, my friend and his partner, they both got shot on a traffic stop. But earlier in that shift, we were riding together. And so I had my first shooting. A few months later, in Simi Valley, Michael Clark was shot and killed on a check the well-being call. That was my first SWAT call out. ever. I was a brand new guy in the SWAT team, and my first call out was the murder of a police officer. And he was the first officer to be killed in the line of duty in the history of Simi Valley. And he was a lateral from LAPD, former Marine. But that was my first call out. And so, I had dealt with my first, death of a colleague. He was the first person that I ever worked with that had got seriously injured, and he didn't survive his injury. So that was tough. And then there was, like, when you're talking about this cumulative effect, there's 2 officers that I worked with in Simi Valley that took their own lives, committed suicide. And then, my friends that got shot in 2006, Ray got shot in 2008. There was a total of 5 people that I worked with throughout my career that took their own lives. Many more that were injured in car accidents and shootings, and just, being exposed to a lot of, I left Simi Valley to go to a busier city, and I got what I asked for.
Sure.
There was a lot going on. And, when you work Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, you're going to go to see some kind of violence every night.
Yeah.
And usually multiple times per night. But the incident that happened in 2006 was my last night in the gang unit. So I was finishing up an 8-year run in the gang unit and on the SWAT team, and I had 2 years of SWAT experience and CMU, so I was just finishing basically 10 years of my time on the SWAT team, and and it was my last night, and we were riding 3-man on a Friday night, and it was me and my partner, and the guy that ended up getting shot was in the back seat. He was our sergeant. I'm not going to say his name because I don't, we didn't talk about this with him, and I'll just,
sure.
But we had spent the first 5-6 hours riding together. We had, gone to other man with a gun calls. We assisted with a vehicle pursuit, and we were very good friends at the time. But we were working. We were in the gang units. We were doing uniform gang enforcement. We had a bunch of people that were in on overtime. We had a series of violent crimes that had happened. So it was like Friday night, where mass enforcement, where we're going and just going from neighborhood to neighborhood, and addressing problems. And about 6-7 hours into the shift, we had stopped by the station to, probably get a cup of coffee or use the restroom. We were walking out the back door, and one of the guys that was working with us was going to go 10-8, get in service. He was walking to his car, and my buddy's like, "Hey man, where's your partner?" And he said, "Oh, she's doing paperwork. She's got to do some reports, so I'm going to go out by myself." So he goes and jumps in with him. And then me and my partner joke, like, "Man, we've been trying to get rid of the Sarge all night. Finally,
yeah, it worked.
Just teasing."
Yeah.
And good, And they leave, and me and my partner leave, and we go to the south end of town, and we were on a ped stop, and we hear them make a traffic stop, and about a minute and a half later, they're fighting for their lives. The guy that was in the back seat of the car that they had stopped had a gun. He was a gang member that they were going to get him out of the car. They could see he was acting squirrely. There was a couple of females in the front seat, and they went to go get him out of the car. And while they were pulling him out of the car, my buddy got shot point blank in the chin. And as he's falling back, the guy comes out and starts shooting at his partner, and he gets shot through both of his legs, literally through his knees. He had 2 rounds through one of his knees and 1 round through the knee on the other leg, and his legs basically get cut out from underneath him, and he's down on the ground. We'll call him John. John goes down, and he's face first, laying on the ground, holding his throat, because that round hit him in the jaw, went down into his neck.
Oh.
And then his partner falls back, from getting hit in the legs, and he's just sitting on his ass, laying down cover fire into this car and putting out this traffic. Shots down, officer down, 2 officers down, 1 officer has a headshot, and he's I think he gets into his second magazine, firing into this car to repel the suspect from coming out. And when me and my partner get there, we were definitely not the first ones there, but there's probably 15 cops there. But the scene that we drove into, they were searching for the suspect. He had put out a direction of travel, and people were in that area, and people that I worked with on our team were getting in that area, and we were driving into the intersection where he got shot, and my intention was, we're going to go here. We turn left because we're going to where they're looking for the bad guy, right? And as we were pulling up there, they said they found him, that they were taking him into custody. So I just stopped. And when I got out of my car, what I see is my friend laying face down on the concrete in full uniform in the street, holding his throat. And that's like the image that's burned into my mind, is this guy laying face down, and all the other, you know, chaos that's happening around that. And the other guy, you know, just, you could see the anguish on his face because of his gunshot injuries, right? And the EMS wasn't there yet. And, you know, and then I ended up staying with him for the rest of the night. You know, I rode in the ambulance with him, and went to the hospital with him. And one of the things that I'll never forget is that, you know, he thought he was going to die. And we're driving in the ambulance, and I'm just trying to keep him calm. Paramedics in there, they weren't really treating him because he's alert, he's awake. You know, so they were saying he was complaining about his side. He had taken a second round in his body armor, in his side, which we figured that out later. But we didn't see an exit wound anywhere. Like, so we thought that the round that hit him in the face was, you know, in his body. And he was married. His wife was my friend, and he's telling me to call his wife. And I'm trying to stop it. Like, look, we have there's procedures that are supposed to, there's supposed to be a way of, like, when one of your people gets hurt, the watch commander is going to go through a checklist of what they do and try and do it a certain way.
Right.
But in the back of a speeding ambulance with a guy that, you know, was not taking no for an answer, you know, he made me call his wife. And she didn't answer. She was asleep.
Oh, wow.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
But then the next phone call I made was to my wife. And that's when I saw the strength, really, of my wife, because I called her up and I said, hey, John got shot. He's alert. I need you to go to so-and-so's house, and I need you to go pound on the door and go wake her up, and then you guys come to the hospital. And she went, okay. And she did that, you know, and did it in an amazing way, and brought her to the hospital. But we get to the ER, and then in the next bay, they bring in his partner, and this is a sheet dividing, you know, the trauma rooms. And these guys start yelling at him, and they're like, hey, is that you? Yeah, Sarge, are you okay? I hear it's going to take more than one headshot to put me down.
Oh, wow.
You know?
He says that.
That's what he said.
That's
it's going to take more than one headshot to put me down. And they just were yelling back at each other, you know, like, you good? Are you good? And it was just, it was so powerful.
Yeah.
It was so powerful what
strength.
they were doing.
Yeah.
Right? Because they were hurt really bad.
Yeah.
They were hurt really bad. And they both, you know, returned to work for a period of time. And eventually they both ended up having to retire medically. But that day was one of the big ones of on the trauma side.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it was bad, you know, seeing something like that, especially with people that you care about.
Of course. Yeah. So just, you know, going back to what we just said, what you just talked about. So, you know, you have your friend Ray shot in the face. You have your shooting that you were involved in. Your partner was involved in a shooting that you were there for, an unarmed suspect. The Sarge being shot in the face. A good friend of yours. His partner being shot in the knees, both knees. Thankfully, they both survived. All the other things over a long career working, you know, Simi Valley, but then, you know, going to a busy, you know, Oxnard city, being exposed to all those things, even as a detective working those violent crimes. Your wife, you know, having cancer, and just a number of other things. Obviously, they build up. And based on that, what are some of the things you experienced personally where you thought, because we talked prior, what are some things that you went through and experienced before you said, I need to look into this for myself and my family?
Yeah. And as I start to describe those things, the thing I want to tell the other first responders or anybody that's, you know, realizes that they're being impacted by the trauma is that number one, it's normal. Number two, it's fixable. And number three, the most important thing is don't wait 5 years to address it because you think it's going to go away or you're not sure what to do. If there was anything I could tell people, it'd be it's okay to raise your hand. Find someone that you trust and that can point you to a therapist or a counselor or just a peer to talk this stuff through. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not going crazy. It's just that the stuff that people say in our world is a normal reaction to abnormal situations, and we go to those things hundreds of times in our careers. So what was I experiencing? When I knew that some stuff was going wrong was I mentioned Dr. Blum. So I spent a lot of time going to training with Dr. Blum. He's a police psychologist, very well known in Southern California, and he's really a leading expert in police psychology issues and stress management. And we would be in training. I was on the peer support team, the trauma support team, the wellness component of the department. And he was training us, and he'd be going, and he'd have his PowerPoint up, and there would be a list of symptoms that people may experience when they're when they're experiencing post-traumatic stress. And he would just read off the list, and I'd be in a group of 20 of my peers, and I'd be like, I have that.
Yeah.
I have that. Oh yeah, I've had that for 2 years. Yeah, I'm actually experiencing that right now, like that. And inside, I was saying, raise your hand.
Right.
The guy's right there, like right where you're at. He's right there. Talk to him and tell him like what's going on. And my own ego, maybe my fears also of like addressing this stuff. But those for me were like the beginnings of knowing. So what was happening? Nightmares. I started having nightmares, sleep problems, hypervigilance, toward the end. But the big things that were happening is that I was getting withdrawn. So if I could just like paint a little picture of some stuff, there's a bunch of critical incidents that happened that didn't all involve me, but there's like, seeing violence repeatedly for years, and then people that I worked with that completed suicide, a couple that I worked with that tried to commit suicide, and thankfully they're still here with us today. People that I worked with that were seriously injured in car accidents, that were attacked by suspects, that they tried to push them off balconies, that they got assaulted, that they got shot, some were killed. And over time that started to affect me. And one of the ways that it was affecting me is that I started getting hypervigilant, and some of that hypervigilance was trying to sleep. I kept having these nightmares that hoodlums were trying to break into my house.
Yeah.
And I was afraid to go to sleep because if I go to sleep, then I don't want to get caught slipping. Right. It felt like when I fall asleep, like I'm not going to hear that noise in the middle of the night. Or what if somebody kicks my door in? And you go, why in the world would you think something like that? Well, when you go to dozens of crime scenes of some person that was asleep in their house and some crazy lunatic kicked in their front door and started stabbing them, right? You start to worry about your own family. Right. And there was a couple of incidents where one particular that I think I never really thought about for a long time, but it's like a normal, regular person was asleep in his apartment and a person kicked in his front door and violently stabbed him to death while his girlfriend or wife was in his bed. But the person that he actually meant to attack was on the floor below him in the same apartment. Like he was trying to kill somebody.
Yeah.
But he went into an innocent person's house and he killed the wrong person with their baby sleeping on the floor, and his wife was in bed with him, and then just dozens of things like that you see but you're pretty good about putting walls up right? You put a wall up around the fort.
Oh yeah.
And then what Dr. Blum taught me is that there are things that start to get inside the fort. They start to get inside the walls of the fort because there's too much of it, or you just not, I look back at it and go, it's like, it's all stress management, right? And then if you don't offload some of that stuff, then you get full. And then every time something else happens, it just amplifies everything. And then on the street, like in the early part of being a field supervisor, is that I got extremely hypervigilant where, and this is in the era also of, remember the Dallas 5 that were killed at the BLM thing. And then there were some Louisiana cops that got ambushed. Somebody calls 911, they put in a fake call, get some cops to come in there, and then somebody starts shooting at them and trying to murder them. And the cops and and then more things where you have these these things are happening, and then you start to get hypervigilant, like you don't want to get caught slipping.
Right.
That like to have some car pull up next to you and you weren't paying attention and there was somebody in the car that wanted to hurt you, or when you're on a call trying to focus on the people that you're supposed to be talking to, you're constantly looking around you because you don't want somebody to walk up on you.
Right.
That might not be good. And what happens is that I started getting really hyper vigilant about stuff like that. And the one example that I can think of is just working the graveyard shift, the morning shift, we called it. And I was just sitting at an intersection and I'm waiting for the light turn. Let's pretend it's midnight and there's nobody really around me. And I'm sitting there at this red light, waiting and waiting and waiting. And all of a sudden I just snapped my head because I felt like I wasn't paying attention.
Oh, wow.
Right. I was like,
and you were aware of yourself doing that.
And I caught, I knew, and I caught myself do that. I'm like, what's wrong with you, man?
Yeah.
But what happened is like, there was this hyper vigilance. That was one example of it happening where I felt like I wasn't paying. I'm waiting. What does a normal person do? You're at a traffic light and you're waiting for the light to change. And then we do. But a police officer in a black and white and full uniform is constantly scanning their surroundings for things that are happening in the community, and then also potential threats to you, Yeah. And so, I mean, that's what hypervigilance, I mean, there's more, but I mean, that was one thing. And a story that involved my kids were, so when my son was old enough to drive and he has a curfew, and when he gets home, you need to check in. Like, hey, if we're asleep, you don't just come home and go in your room. Right. And when you come in, and one night, and I was still an officer at this time, and my son came in, and he walks up to the side of my bed, and he's like, Dad, and I sat up with a C-clamp, and I was reaching for his throat, and I chased him halfway across, or halfway out of bed. And my son is yelling, Dad, because I'm coming at him, like grabbing at his neck. And so from that point on, the kids would always just touch my toe when they came in. They touch my foot, or maybe get something and push me.
Yeah.
Right. And when you asked me, like, the stuff that happened with my grandfather, my mom told me that when she was young, she went into my grandfather's room. And when he's sleeping flat on his back, he slept like this with his hands across his chest. And he said, well, I slept that way because in case if the Japs snuck into your camp at night, at least we were protecting your heart. Like if they tried to stab you, it would be harder for them to get to your heart.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And similar thing, my mom had told me a couple of, something else, similar thing, like, you don't startle your dad when he's asleep.
Right.
And so you get that startle response of like, you come up fighting.
Oh.
And then that's kind of what happened, is that when he woke me up, in my mind, it's just like you went to red alert and, we're going to push back against what it was that, you thought was a threat to you.
Yeah. And, so you got help.
Yeah. So I'd been having nightmares for 2 years straight. So one of the things there was this theme, there was other stuff, but there was this common theme of like bad people trying to break into my house. And what would happen is I would like start to fall asleep and I would wake back up. And I think as time went on, I was almost like afraid to fall asleep because I knew that when I fell asleep, I was going to have a nightmare. Cause I literally had nightmares every night for at least 2 years straight. And so I was getting to the point of where I knew what was happening. So that's the whole thing. But I was part of our wellness program for, total of about 15 years. But at this time, it's like, at least 10 years at this point. And I'm like, I know what's happening. Like, I know what these things mean. It's like, I think I might have post-traumatic stress. But I was afraid to, I just kept putting it off. I'd always find a reason to put it off. And then one day I was sitting in a training and somebody was talking about dealing with mentally ill veterans. And they were talking about just interacting with veterans in the community. It was the war years, and that there's veterans out in the community that have post-traumatic stress. And here's some tips to, deal with them. And it was, she was a psychologist, and she wrote her, she was a MFT, marriage family.
Yep.
She wrote her name and her phone number up on the board. And there's all these trainings we go to where people write their name up on the board. Nobody ever calls.
No.
But I wrote it down, and I called her, and I said, hey, here's what's going on. And could you, maybe connect? I don't know who to call. You think you could connect me with somebody? She called me back a few hours. Here's a couple phone numbers for you to call. And what happened, though, is that I trusted that person, and that, which is really an important thing. I mean, for any first responder agency, it's like, how do you build trust with your people so that they feel safe to come forward and ask for some help? But I felt like I trusted that person. I knew her previously. I'd been to some other meetings with her, and I felt like I could trust her, and she would like point me in the right direction. And then I called a therapist, and I went saw this person for 6 months. And I did EMDR, which is a technique that helps unlock trauma. And, I don't have nightmares anymore. But like, it took years of me kind of suffering unnecessarily to finally go and ask for some help. And, that's kind of what I advocate now for with people, is trying, it's really about building trust. People have to trust you, because and then you can have your own like pity party too. You go like, oh, I have post-traumatic stress. Right. Like, you put some label on yourself. Yeah. And then you got to go like, whoa, man, hey, Larry always talked about like all that pain and that trauma that you experience, wear it as a badge of honor, right? You're taking on all of the community's troubles, right? And it's totally normal for people to get to a point where like, hey, something's happening here where this is more than I can handle, and I need some help, and Jocko always talks about on his podcast about like, like if your car was clunking down the road, you'd go see a mechanic, because a mechanic knows how to work on your car.
That's right.
There's mind mechanics out there that know how to help people deal with trauma, right? But we're more afraid to go ask for the mind mechanics because it's scary and voodoo,
and it's personal. And sometimes you don't want to hear the truth on what you need to do.
Yes.
To fix that clunk or that noise to get you better.
Yeah. And then, the other thing that I think was a little bit, I'll say scary, is that I've been stuffing this stuff down for 20 years. And now I'm going to open up Pandora's box, and I'm going to have to deal with like all this stuff that I pushed down. Yeah. And it was a painful experience to deal with it, but it was probably the best thing I could have ever done.
Yeah. And I'm sure people around you, your wife, your kids, family, coworkers, friends, may have seen, some of the things that were going on, and the fact that you faced reality and said, I need to deal with this shit right like now. And you did. I'm sure they're grateful. That you did that.
Yeah, and I thought that I was hiding it from them, and they were talking, privately behind my back, going like, come over, like, is today good, Dad? Today? Yeah. You find that out years later, but there was a particular Thanksgiving where this last thing I guess I'll say about this, when I talk about being withdrawn, like, what is being withdrawn? I didn't want to interact with anyone in my family. My family's all in the kitchen. They're cooking Thanksgiving. Everyone's at our house, my kids, my in-laws, probably a couple other people. And I'm sitting in the living room by myself, drinking a beer. And I just wanted to go sit in the garage by myself. I just wanted to be alone. All the people that I love are actually right here. They're all in the room. Yeah. They're all right there. And I was getting so kind of emotionally damaged that I wanted it to be quiet. I just wanted to go in the garage and just be by myself. and I wasn't enjoying anything that was happening. Everybody else is laughing.
Yeah.
Girls are cooking and everybody's having a good time. And I'm sure all of them were like, what's wrong with Dad?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and there's many, many times I'm sure they had those conversations like, why is Dad being that way? Or, what's wrong? You know, when you sit, for 25 years with your back up against the wall at every restaurant that you eat in, you see all you see a lot of the good stuff in the community, but usually seeing the other side of what's going on in town.
Yeah. And that the habits of sitting, hey, I need that booth. I need the wall behind me. For me, that has not changed. I mean, there's so much that I'm still doing, and to this day, after being in law enforcement for 33 years, being married since 1997, and kids, they get on me about certain things like my driving, and I'm like, girls, I'm looking, and they're like, no, you're not. I'm like, they don't realize that is you are looking, but your head's not on a swivel. There's an art to it. You've been doing it for so long. So yeah, I still sit obviously with my back up against the wall. So, okay. Well, I'm glad, that you sought that help and you're doing things, to work with, that public safety advocacy and being an advocate for the first responders. What are some of the organizations that you work with, and what are you doing today to help others?
Yeah. So today I'm working with First Responder Wellness, and it's a treatment center, residential treatment for public safety. And the only people that we take care of are cops, firefighters, dispatchers, paramedics, some federal people, secret squirrels, DEA, FBI. But, it's a place for when the wheels fall off, when somebody's dealing with post-traumatic stress or alcoholism, addiction, depression, anxiety. It's a place for them to get well and take care of, the stuff that I was dealing with 6-8 years ago and longer ago, that thousands of first responders like us are dealing with, and but we only help them, and that's what I love about the organization is that when I retired, I wanted to continue to help cops, and I wasn't sure what that was going to look like.
Right.
And for almost 2 years that I've been retired, I've been I worked for a nonprofit for 1.5 years, and then for the last 6 months or so, I've been with First Responder Wellness, and I'm part of a really high performing team that has a mission to help public safety, and that's what we do. And all that stuff that I went through, one of the things that we didn't talk about is my wife had cancer, in the middle of all this, and I got hurt in a really freak accident where I broke my back. And I'm really lucky that I'm not paralyzed right now. But I fractured a vertebrae, and quite frankly, it's a miracle that I wasn't paralyzed when that happened. And I had to have a back surgery, and I really thought that my career was over. I thought that I just ruined my whole career, and now because it was an off-duty incident where I got hurt. So I got 6 screws in my back and a couple rods, and I can't get up out of a chair by myself. And so 3 weeks after I have the surgery, my wife gets diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And so you have all the trauma from work, and then you have some stuff in your personal life, and then you have a catastrophic injury, and my wife has cancer, and I don't know if this is going to kill her.
Right.
Like, what's our life going to be like? And it really felt like the walls, were, so that cumulative thing, it's not just work stuff. Some people have childhood trauma. I got kind of pulled away from my family when I was 9 years old when we moved to California. And I'm not saying that that caused anything, but it's like people have been through some significant things from when they were kids.
Oh, yeah.
And then you get the stuff that you get exposed to in the first responder community. And I got hurt really bad. My wife has a deadly disease that we have to go through. And what happened is that all of these people came together and helped us. So our peer support program, our neighbors, the community, people did a little fundraiser for us. And, when I talked to my, the administrators that were at the department, they didn't think I was coming back. They're like, oh, this dude's done, man.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
We're going to help him and support him best we can. But, they pretty much thought like McGreevy's done. And I thought maybe I'm done too. because I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to recover from this well enough, strong enough to get back to work. And I did, but I had to work really hard and I had to fight through and then support my wife. And then what happened is that like we were both hurt and sick together, and going through that together made our marriage stronger than ever. And the other thing that happened is that when I got back to work, I had a tremendous sense of loyalty to the department.
Right.
Because some people feel abandoned. Some people get cut off. Some people don't get very well taken care of. And I felt like, to the best that they could, individually, people were there for us. And organizationally, the department, put me in a position where I could heal and get better and continue to serve. One of the things that I'm kind of jumping around here, something that happened right before I broke my back is I got skipped for promotion. So I was sitting number 1 on the sergeant's list, and I thought I was going to get promoted. And then I found out that they had made a different decision and that they were going to skip me. So I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
It was humiliating. I felt like I failed my family, because you want to do a little bit better, make a little bit more money. You got 20 years on the job. You think you're ready for a leadership assignment in the organization. And I really had to think long and hard about how I handled that, because we talked about this last week, right? About you can become a malcontent.
Oh, yeah.
An anti-department, an anti-administration, and blame everybody else. It's their fault. They're screwing me over. And, the path that I chose is that step back and look at yourself and what you've been doing. You've obviously done something to give somebody the feeling that we don't think he's ready, or something that you've done in the past that you're not forgiven for yet.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it takes time.
Right?
Yeah.
And what I wanted to do was prove them wrong. That, okay, I'm not, whatever it is that you're concerned about, I need to prove to you, I need to show you, I have to build trust with you that this is what I'm going to do. And this is what I want to do. And I want to serve the organization. I want to try and be a good sergeant. I want to advance my career. And that was the mentality I took. But right when that happened, I broke my back.
Wow.
Right? So, there's just like all this compiling stuff, and like it's cumulative.
Yeah.
There's this cumulative stuff going on. Like you think, oh man, now I'm not going to get promoted for 2 years. Now I have a broken back, and I have a hospital bed in the living room of my house, and people have to help me get in and out of bed, and I can't do anything by myself.
Right.
People have to help me walk to the bathroom and walk back to my little, bed that's in the good thing about, being hurt in 2012 is that Breaking Bad was on.
You got this binge watch.
So I got to binge watch, everything, but Breaking Bad, all these series. But
wow.
Coming out of that, that and all the stuff that my wife and I went through, the next time I took the sergeant's test, I was number 1 on the list. And it was because I think I showed them that, hey, I've matured, and they saw that this guy doesn't quit. Doesn't mean like I was going to give up on the promotion, but my goal was, I want to show you guys that, yes, I can be an effective leader. I do have something to offer as a field supervisor, and I made them feel comfortable with, like, okay, we're going to promote this guy. And, that guy that was probably one of the voices of skipping me, he pulled me in his office in 2018 and said, hey, this year you're going to be supervisor of the year.
Wow.
And so, look how, where you can go from one extreme to the other.
Oh,
if you just have some humility and try and think about somebody else's perspective and look at yourself and go like, all right, this isn't their fault.
Yeah.
This is my fault. And I need to, okay, you have it in you, but you need to show them. So, right. And that's learning how this, the drink gets stirred.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You got it. Yeah. You have to be open to that and to learn. Yeah. So, that's a lot. That's a lot to go through.
Yeah.
And, at work and away from work at home, and involving, the love of your life, your wife, and all that. So kudos to you for addressing those issues and understanding there's something going on and not blaming others and not becoming a malcontent, but reflecting back on how you can improve and do well, and it paid off. So congratulations on that. So tell me about Echelon Front. What exactly is Echelon Front? What do they do, and who's involved in that?
Yeah, so Echelon Front is really famous because of Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. They're the co-founders of that, and they wrote a book called Extreme Ownership. And when I go and speak to groups, and I've got this slide in my presentation, I said there's two things that changed my life, and it was raising my hand to say that I need to get some help, and then reading Extreme Ownership. And those two things kind of happened at the same time in 2015. But Echelon Front is a leadership consulting company, and I got heavily involved in studying the leadership principles from Extreme Ownership, because when I read the book, everything just clicked for me like this. Everything made sense, and it wasn't like they were teaching me something that's new. It was the way that they packaged it and presented it. It made sense for me. And then what happened is I started really using those principles to the way I made every decision that I was making, whether it was dealing with one of my personnel or a tactical scenario or a strategic thing where really the relationship part of building relationships up and down the chain of command.
Oh yeah.
I really had to think that stuff through. And I mean, we could probably do I think a podcast on relationship building and about dealing with the chain of command.
It's so important. Yeah. No, there's definitely. That's a good idea.
I'd love to do that, because I think it's crap, and I have my own experience. Like, I was just a sergeant, but man, getting to build trust with your chief and your assistant chief, that's how you get stuff done. And what I learned is, like, the more trust that my bosses had with me, the more operational freedom I had.
Oh, totally. Yeah, you're right.
Because they also could have kept me on a very short leash and only allowed me to do certain things. But what happened is that I built trust with my bosses, and if I did, get too close to the line, we would talk about what the line was, and then usually I'm like the guy that, like, hey, I only make that mistake once, and that's what you want.
Yeah.
People make mistakes, or you say something maybe you shouldn't have said, or you do something that that didn't work out quite exactly as I was hoping, right? Yeah. You take a chance, or you do something maybe a little bit aggressive, meaning like an aggressive tactic, not aggression toward people. And then, somebody talks to you about, hey, what their concern was like that, and then you're making adjustments and going, and maintain. That's how you maintain the trust with them, is that, you're keeping them informed, and, you've got the kind of the intent of what they want done, and then transferring that down to your team so we can try and, achieve what the mission is. But yeah, Echelon Front's a leadership consulting business, and I started going to their trainings back in 2016, and now I'm just over the last 2 going on 3 years, I'm part of their muster crew. And what I do is I just go and I support the operations of the muster, meaning like helping with registration and getting people where they need to be, and just helping with whatever it is that is needed. They've got a whole crew of people that do stuff, and myself and about 6 other people are part of their muster crew, and we go to the different events. And I think it's amazing, because I get to talk with people that are just like me. When I went to my first event, they're so excited to be there. They've never been to an Echelon Front training before. They're excited to meet Jocko or meet Leif or other folks on the team, JP Donnell. And I think about, that's how I was in 2016. I was like, man, I can't wait to meet these guys. But by repeatedly getting exposed to the training, it really helped me with my career professionally, and I think in my personal life too. My wife and I we both participate and practice this together.
Oh, that's awesome. That book, I had heard before the book came out. I don't know if I read something about it or heard about it, but I'm like, okay, I need to order this book. So I pre-ordered that book, and it came, and I read it. Phenomenal book. But now that we're talking, I'm like, and I still have it, obviously. I'm like, I need to crack that thing open and read it again. It is a good read. It's not just for first responders. I mean, I highly encourage people, if they have not read that book, to read the book. And Jocko's podcast obviously is phenomenal. So good. And I see you're wearing a shirt. Discipline equals freedom. Where'd you get the shirt? And
I was down in San Diego last week at Victory MMA, and it's a gym that's owned by Jocko. And I was at the Poor Act conference was down there, and we were eating dinner right around the corner from where the gym is. And I was talking to my colleague who'd never heard of extreme ownership before, and I said, "Well, his gym's right around the corner. I'm gonna go buy a shirt. Like, let's go over there."
Yeah.
And we went in there, and I was telling her about extreme ownership, and there was books there. So she actually bought a book, and then we were getting ready to leave, and the girl that was ringing us out said, "Jocko's upstairs. If you want to go upstairs, you're welcome to go up there, and you can go see what's going on. He's teaching a class right now." So we went upstairs, and it's cages up there. They were doing MMA, not MMA, but jiu-jitsu training, and Dean Lister was up there with him. And I just went up there and was watching, and I said, "Yeah, that's Jocko there, and that's Dean Lister." And Jocko looks up at me, and he gives me a little nod. He's like, comes over, and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing here, man?"
Yeah.
We're not friends or anything. He knows who I am because I come to his events, and he was really nice. And so he saw that she had a book, and he was kind enough to sign her book for her. But yeah, no, I'm a huge supporter of what Echelon Front does, and honored to be able to volunteer and be part of their muster crew, because I think that what the training that they're providing to first responders and to the business community is really top notch and second to none. And what's great about going to these trainings that they call them muster, they do them 3 times a year, is that there's business executives from every industry that you can think of: aerospace, plumbers, construction, IT people, book publishers, medical industry. There's folks from the Catholic Church, and there's just people that are and you see all this diverse people from all over the country and internationally. There's people at this last one I was at from Canada, the UK, Australia.
Oh, wow.
People that fly in from all over the world now to go to this training, and we're all we're all different. But there's a similarity that we have, is that we're really intrigued by this book, Extreme Ownership, and what this company is doing. So it's been a pretty phenomenal. Personally, they've done so much for me, and I always tell them, like, I told Jocko the first time I got a chance to meet him and actually just say something to him, and I said, "Hey, sir, you're changing lives." And he said, "Hey, man, I appreciate that." And I tell Leif, like, "Hey, sir, I always appreciate the opportunity to be here and just support the mission of what you guys are doing." So, because they did a lot for me,
Yeah.
and I think they don't feel that way. There's a lot of people, I think, that say, like, "Hey, this book did so much for me." But when I get out there and I speak with groups about wellness and stuff like that, what I tell people is that you have to lead yourself. So Extreme Ownership is a leadership book packed in with some military examples of what happened in the Battle of Ramadi, and then what they do now with the business community. But you have to lead yourself, and you have to first, right, look at yourself and what you're doing, and then work on your team, your organization. You may not lead anybody but yourself,
Yeah.
right? But people will notice what you're doing, and that's how you can get some attention for yourself. Is like is do what you're supposed to do. Don't stop growing, don't stop learning. I'm retired. I'm a retired guy now, right? But I'm not stop learning. I still go to leadership conferences. I don't work for anybody. I mean, I don't lead anybody. I'm just out there trying to help first responders, but I'm always trying to do a better job for my family and grow, I think, as a person.
Well, I appreciate you sharing, being so open with all of us about your experiences, what you went through, your challenges, what you did to get better. Sometimes it's tough for people to admit things or let that wall down. We talked about that fort, and I can build up a wall with the best of them, but it's difficult sometimes for people to lower that wall, to be open to people. So thank you for being just genuine and honest with sharing your story and what you did and what you're doing to help others, first responders. It goes a long way, and it's a priority. More people are open to it. Back in the day, it was not. It's something you admitted, something you didn't address. You just thought you were dealing with it. In reality, you were not dealing with it. And it impacted your life, but also people around you that you care about. So the officer wellness, or the first responder wellness, is extremely important. So thank you for really getting involved.
I appreciate that. And I think that more administrators are being open to supporting their personnel. Like, you know, in the early days, you know, you have a critical incident. Let's just say if you get into a shooting, you had to go see a psychologist, and it was really just checking a box. And then there was really no aftercare or follow-up after that. It was like, hey, we sent you to go talk to somebody, but anyways, you're never going to say anything's wrong.
No,
like
exactly.
You go,
right?
You can, everything's cool. I'm fine. Everything's great.
Just in that meeting.
You're not going to come forward and tell any, you know, you wouldn't tell people like if you were struggling. And early on, I wasn't struggling with anything. It's like, you know, hey, this happened. But later on, I appreciate what you said. And I think like for where I'm at now in my life is like, I have to be open. Like I'm not afraid to tell people that I went and talked to a therapist. It was like one of the smartest things I ever did. And if someone hears this and that is struggling with something, is there's 100 different ways for you to get help. And if you don't want anybody to know about it, nobody will know about it.
Yeah.
There's, you know, but you're not alone. And what every cop or firefighter worth their salt is going to have post-traumatic stress multiple times throughout their career. And it's okay. And it's normal. And it's just in the way that you manage it.
Yeah. No, very well said. So, well, Jeff, before we wrap up, it's obvious through your entire, I mean, since you were what, how old were you trying to join the Marines early, you know, way back when you had that calling for service. So, you know, you, as a Marine, you served our nation. As a police officer, you served, you know, the communities you worked. Now that you're retired, you're helping first responders with their wellness. It's obvious that you want to help people, and that you have a calling, and that you've lived a life of service. And it doesn't matter what level through your career, you led a life as a leader, a career as a leader, and I think more importantly, you were a servant leader. So I appreciate you taking the time to drive from Oxnard to be in good old South Bay and to fight that traffic. But no, really do appreciate you taking the time. I really appreciate all that you're doing these days. And thank you for being our guest today on Behind the Line podcast.
I appreciate it, man. It's good talking to you. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like the show, please follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For the show notes from each episode, visit behindthelinepod.com. If you want to support the show and hear more from our first responders and military veterans, head over to patreon.com/behindtheline. I'll see you on the next one.